Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's prepared to meet with President-elect Trump at any moment and that the two countries should normalize relations. This comes, as CNN has learned, the Obama administration delayed going public with information about Russia's interference in the U.S. election over fears of giving Donald Trump new ammunition and his claims that the whole system is rigged against him, as well as the threat of an escalating cyber war with Moscow. And joining me now is the former director of the CIA and NSA, retired four-star General Michael Hayden. General Hayden, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jake.
Appreciate it. So take a listen to what White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest had to say in response to Donald Trump claiming that the intelligence community doesn't really know who was behind the hacking. Take a listen.
There's ample evidence that was known long before the election, and even in most cases long before October, about the Trump campaign in Russia. Everything from the Republican nominee himself calling on Russia to hack his opponent. It might be an indication that he was obviously aware and concluded, based on whatever facts or sources he had available to him, that Russia was involved.
There you go. The White House seeming to suggest, hey, it's obvious that Donald Trump himself knew. He made that remark that Trump later said was a joke, suggesting that the Russians should go ahead and hack Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, look, I think the president-elect is the only prominent America about whom I am aware that has not yet conceded that the Russians conducted a massive covert influence campaign against the United States. I think that is accepted throughout the intelligence community. That is not contentious. There are a few things on the margins about intentionality that are being debated, but the fact that the Russians did this has been the conclusion not just of the American intelligence community, but of private sector companies that have looked at the DNC computer system.
And the question, I guess, is that there is a debate among the intelligence agencies as to what the reason was. Russians do this all over the world.
Right.
Sometimes it's just to sow doubt so that the public doesn't trust any institution. So sometimes it's to sway an election one way or another. What do you think about what the motive was?
So my personal belief at the moment, based upon the evidence that I have been able to see in the open press, is I think the Russians were messing with our heads. All right, I am not prepared to personally conclude that they were trying to pick a winner. And Jake, I'm not doing that on any evidence either. I'm just thinking that the ability to predict how that information would affect the American political process, you know, both campaigns used that event for their own talking points. The ability to predict that is so difficult. I think they've been quite happy to just simply sow the kind of confusion that we've just seen. And by the way, I call this a covert influence campaign. It has succeeded beyond all expectations. Look at what we're doing now because of it. We have the president-elect of the United States publicly condemning the intelligence services on which he will have to rely as president. If I'm running that covert action, I'm putting it in the wind column.
Well, it is a stunning development, the fact that the intelligence agencies have reached this conclusion about the Russians, the enemy in a way, and essentially the president-elect is siding with the enemy. Is that too harsh an assessment?
Well, no. What I can say is that on this particular event, what Mr. Trump says about it is the same thing that Mr. Putin says about it. And there's, frankly, no arguing that point.
Now, you wrote in the Washington Post about this relationship between the president-elect and the intelligence community. One of the things you wrote was that about this problem. Intelligence should be called on to create the basis and set the boundaries for rational policy choices. That's still true. The odds that will happen, though, seem a little bleaker after this past week, and we are moving in the wrong direction. What is your advice to intelligence officers, the kind of people that you used to lead when you were head of the CIA?
So we've got a big close-in problem, what the Russians just did. But I also think, Jake, we've got a big, longer-range problem, and that's the reality that the president-elect seems to have far more confidence in his intuition, in his a priori judgments and assumptions, and he doesn't allow them to be affected by the fact-based analysis that the American intelligence community, frankly, is designed to provide him. So although this is troubling enough, what really worries me is, will we be able to establish that kind of healthy relationship between the American intelligence community, frankly, Jake, that exists to inform the president between that community and the incoming president. So what I would say is my old guys, they have a heavy lift. It's their job to get into the head of the new president. Now, it's nice when the president makes that easier, but whether the president makes it easier or hard, the intel guys have to figure out how do they get their data into the mind of that principal. So again, it's never a syllogism, Jake, you know, whereas, therefore, Hayden, but you do have the responsibility to set the left and the right-hand boundary of logical, realistic policy discussions.
Kellyanne Conway the other night said that they didn't like foreign governments trying to intrude in the political process, and they didn't like the intelligence agencies trying to intrude in the political process. What's your response to that? And what is the personal response of your friends who are still in the agency?
So I'll take that one first, all right? There's a great deal of disappointment and, frankly, disappointment trending towards anger to be so casually dismissed. With regard to being political, Jake, let me put it to you this way. John Brennan, the current director out there, John loves CIA. John's been in CIA all of his adult life. There is no earthly reason John would shove the agency he loves out into this traffic lane where they are now unless he was compelled to do so by what they believe to be the facts. And so this is not CIA being political or being politicized. Now, I take it, once you put that information into the public domain in Washington's current atmosphere, one side or the other, depending on the issue, is going to pick it up and use it to hit the other side. But that doesn't mean the intelligence is politicized.
One of the things that the Russians have tried to do is convince the Europeans and others throughout the world that there's a moral equivalence between the United States and Russia, that essentially it's just two superpowers fighting and there's really no difference, as if they have the same human rights record and stand for the same freedoms that the United States does, which is obviously not the case. Are you at all afraid that this posture that the new president-elect has towards Russia could actually create that kind of impression within the United States of U.S. versus Russia?
Well, I mean, the president-elect, and he is the president-elect, and his legitimacy is not in question.
No one's questioning,
all right? He did create quite a dystopian view of America, the American economy, American borders, and American political processes. Now, look, I know how campaigns run. One expects then that successful candidates kind of trend back towards the center, tack back towards the center. We'll see if this president does it. But you created an interesting formula there, Jake. You talked about creating this equivalency between the Russian political process and the American. You know, Jake, if you live inside the Russian information sphere, if you're there being bombarded each day by RT in your Russian television, in your native language, they are attempting to build up that equivalency between themselves and the United States. It's horribly false, but more and more people, I fear, are beginning to believe it.
All right, General Michael Hayden, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.